Good afternoon. I want to thank everybody who joined us. Ukraine Media Center Ukrinform continues its operation and it's day 272 of heroic resistance of the Ukrainian people, and I want to introduce our next speaker. It's Vadym Denysenko, Executive Director of the Ukrainian Institute for Future. Good afternoon, Mr. Vadym. Good afternoon, Mr. Vadym. How did the situation change in Russia upon their armed forces were ousted from Kherson region? How did their narratives and messages change? What's going on now? Unfortunately, currently we have to say that in mass conscious of the Russians, after the liberation of Kherson, cognitive dissonance story happened. In principle, they reconciled with mobilization and they gave themselves the answer what mobilization was necessary for. Their answer is that mobilization is necessary to end the war in the soonest possible. This is the same they are telling themselves after liberation of Kherson. So they started telling themselves that the government has plan B, and this plan contemplates mobilization, and it also contemplates giving up Kherson and saving their guys, as they say. In fact, there is no plan B. I think that they will realize it in a couple of months. But as of now, they try to make up a myth that there is a plan B, that the government can keep the offensive operations, but the vast majority understands that the things are moving in a different way, not how the government promised. It's a political schizophrenia. In Russian language, there is a term double thinking, is when you have two opposite thoughts in your head and you reconcile with them. And the majority of Russians, the absolute majority of Russians, they reconcile with the thought that both mobilization and plan B is something that will allow them show out somewhere else, but they will realize that there is no plan B. Well, you mentioned that there is some schizophrenia going on, but on the top level of Russian government, what's going on there? We heard the statement by Dugin. It's quite difficult to accept it, where the statement where he accuses Putin of everything. He removed that post in just a day. He said he was misunderstood, and he wrote a praising post about Putin. But talking about the political elites of the Russian Federation, currently there is only one situative group which is quite active, who try to elbow their way to the Olympus, is the situative alliance of Prigozhin and Kadyrov. Both of them have limited both human and financial resource. Well, Kadyrov wills more of it, but to get to the Olympus, to the highest league of Russian politics, they need to receive some grazing. They need to receive some financial structures and obviously Ministry of Defense, and Putin will not accept any appointment of either Prigozhin's or Kadyrov's people to be appointed in the Ministry of Defense. He only uses them as the threats, like if I disappear, this is who can come in power. But they're in under full control of the Russian government, and they are integrated into the Russian government. They can only afford some strong statements regarding the officials of the second echelon, like the generals and the governor of Belgorod region. As to the other groups, de facto there are currently two influence groups which are distanced from others. They are FSB headed by Patrushev and situational alliance of Kirienko and Oh my God, I forgot it. And Kovalchuk's group. So those are situational alliances, and these two groups, in fact, they play 80% of the Russian politics in general. Saying about some war between these groups and about their government toppling over, we cannot talk about it yet. So from the 1st of December, they will try to tighten the knots in this small segment of mass media, which is not yet under the control of the government. I mean, the Telegram channels. From the 1st of December, the censor is being implemented. Something similar to North Korea is being implemented in Russia, so everything will be restricted. I don't know how it will operate, because even the most loyal journalists will feel it difficult to work in this system, but they will implement those laws starting from the 1st of December. How did the goals of so-called special operation change? We see them changing constantly, the substance of them, who mouths those goals. What's going on now, in your opinion? What's the goal, in your opinion, now? The major goal is destruction of Ukraine. It didn't go anywhere, but based on the realities as they offer us to do, is the beginning of the negotiations process. Not to stop the war, but to suspend it, to get a breather. And what's not less important, to divide the collective West. So the negotiations are aimed at division of the collective West. So the tactics of a small victories, this is what they know how to do, and this is what they need those negotiations for. The mobilization, we all remember when it was announced, and many of the Ukrainians were hoping that it would become a launch of so-called processes of inciting of the crowds. In Russia, is the second wave possible, and is it possible that the second wave will be accepted by Russians in a different way? It's difficult to say if there will be a second wave. They seem to be preparing for this. They will probably not announce the second wave, but they will just extend the second one, maybe in a few months. First, they need to process those 300,000 to do something with them. Well, it may take maybe 3, maybe 4 months, so it's difficult to answer this question now, but at least 2-3 months they will withhold from announcing that second wave. Is it going to incite any revolutionary mood in Russia? Russians are living in a situation of plan B, and they think that everything is going to be all right. They have quite a surprising future, which is difficult to understand. For example, to Ukrainians, they think that those who come into ranks of the army, it's no big deal if they die. So they have no empathy to their own. It's a different caste. And like the person comes there, they're in the war, and everything is okay. If there is any hope for some riots in future, well, we see something on a daily basis, but it's related to the economic issues, like somebody was not paid, they were not provided with their uniform. As soon as the economic issues are solved, their riot just fades off. Usually all the pacifistic movements, in one way or another, they throughout the world were relying on the committees of soldiers' mothers and the organizations alike. Just like it was happening in the USSR before the war, Russia cleared that field completely. So in fact, all the organizations which were to any extent influential in that segment, they were eliminated. They are either foreign agents, or they are they are silenced. So now we're facing absolutely illogical, absolutely incomprehensible story that in the pro-war electorate in the Russian Federation is the women who say that the men should go to war, and the motivation is like I feel ashamed for my husband avoiding going to the war. And the second motivation, which is absurd for us, that he was beating me for the last 10 to 20 years, so let him show his bravery in the war. So it's absolutely impossible to imagine something like this in Ukraine. Winter campaign, what does Russia count on except for the negotiations, which would have been the best case scenario for them? They are still relying on 300,000 mobilized ones, and they think that the newly mobilized ones, and thanks to the strikes on the Ukrainian power infrastructure, they will achieve something. Currently, I will not discover America for you if I say that they are only capable of maintaining warfare in a very short distance of the front line. They don't have any capabilities other than to maintain it in Bakhmut, Avdiivka region. If it's possible to change this situation under conditions of the mobilization, it's hard to say, but this is what they count on, dear colleagues. Your questions, Maria Gonchar, Ukrinform. What's your opinion of the main factors influencing the fact that that may change the military and top-level government in Russia, and why Putin does not touch Shoigu, notwithstanding his misfortune in Kherson region? I don't think that there will be any changes in military, in top-level military management in Russian Federation. Shoigu controls the Ministry of Defense, and it's not just caption, it's the infinite financial and human resource. So if you put any other person to the Ministry of Defense, you just break the balance of forces in elites of Russian Federation. If it's an ambitious person, it can become, this person can become more powerful than FSB, and Putin cannot afford it. And that's why Shoigu will remain the head of Ministry of Defense. Dear friends, any more questions?
Newsweek. In your assessment, what is Russia's plan for the winter? And how does their plan for the winter support their idea, their theory of how they can actually still possibly win this war? What is Russia trying to do? And what should the West be aware of when these rumors about potential negotiations start to pop up in American newspapers?
Перш за все, я повторю.
Well, first of all, I will repeat myself. Russians count on the negotiations process to begin. They want the negotiations real bad. They need a breather. They need time to accumulate forces, to gather the forces, and also to divide the collective West. They will make some financial offers like a grain deal. So this is their, in exchange for something, this is their strategy for now. Regarding the war, their strategy is the 300,000 mobilized ones. So when the temperature falls below zero, when the material will be able to move, they think that they will be able to break the situations, to break through the front lines, but I have doubts that they have any forces to gain any capabilities of the warfare along the front line in total, as it was back on 24th of February.
Do you see any indication that the United West is vulnerable or is breaking apart as a result of these Russian initiatives? Or is the United West more or less still united in support of Ukraine?
Ну, станом на зараз, на щастя, ми ніяких подібних речей не бачимо. Тобто,
We don't see anything like this so far. We can say that even notwithstanding the number of things that that Russia was trying to push, there were two stories that Russians were trying to push. They are the elections in Italy and elections in the United States. And even notwithstanding the change of government in Italy, and that the Congress now has the Republican majority, there are no changes as to support of Ukraine in the Congress. Thank you for this conversation. I will remind you we had Vadym Denysenko visiting us, the executive director of the Ukrainian Institute for the Future. Our next briefing is at 1500. We will have Andriy Demchenko join us, the spokesperson for the State Border Guard Service of Ukraine. Trust in our armed forces and glory to Ukraine.